What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be going over my Season 7 Pulverized leveling build here in Mobalytics. Now, before we get started, I did want to go ahead and mention that I also have the mid-tier as well as the in-game tier version of this build in the same planner, and I do plan on making a video for that in the future, but for right now, we're just going to be sticking with the leveling build for this video. And also, I have made several tweaks to a few of my builds here in Mobalytics, so if you are using one of my builds like Cataclysm, just go ahead and go back and look at it, because I did forget to change the overpower damage on Cataclysm to the lightning bolt damage tempering on the weapon, gloves, and amulet. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and go over our leveling build. So not much has really changed on this build from Season 6, except for the brand new seasonal mechanic, and this is a build I really like leveling with regardless if I'm playing softcore or hardcore. And I did go ahead and start out in hardcore this season, and I had no issue leveling through all of the content, and I even used this build all the way up until Torment 2, just so that way I knew that it would be a very good build for you guys to try out. So starting off with our primary skills, we're using Pulverize and Claw, and we're only using Claw so that we can build up our buffs on the Druid class. Then we're slotting in our Poison Creeper companion ability, and then from there we're picking up Cataclysm, and we are going to be maxing that out, but later on in our leveling process. And I really like Cataclysm in this build because using an overpowered Cataclysm using the Provocation buff is incredibly powerful for burning down those single target bosses, which can sometimes be a little bit difficult for Pulverize early on. Then we're also going to be picking up Earthen Bulwark for that nice crowd control break, and then we're slotting in Cyclone Armor just to give us a little bit more damage reduction from non-physical sources. Now moving on to our spirit boons, we have a really nice change this season with Gift of the Stag. Now, even though it doesn't show it in Mobalytics, Gift of the Stag this season will give you a passive 5 spirit regeneration, so a really great addition to the Druid to help us with the leveling process early on. Then on the Eagle, we're going to be slotting in Scythe Talons as well as swooping attacks to get that critical hit chance as well as the attack speed. Then moving on to the Wolf, we're going to be picking up Calamity so we can extend the duration of our overpowered Cataclysm. And then on the Snake Boon, we're going to be using Obsidian Slam. Now, if you didn't know, the Snake Boon has been changed for Season 7 to now give you a guaranteed overpower on your 6th Earth skill use. So you're pretty much getting overpowers pretty consistently with any Earth skill build that you choose to use on the Druid class this season. Now moving on to our aspects and uniques. On the helmet, we're going to be using Juggernaut aspect for the extra armor. Then on the chest piece, we're going to use Aspect of Might to get that extra damage reduction. From there, on our gloves, we're using the Aspect of Ursine Horror to turn Pulverize into an Earth skill. And then on our pants, we're using Skinwalker's Aspect, so that way we get that nice heal when we quick shift between Werewolf and Werebear, hence why we are using the Claw skill. Then moving on to the boots, we're going to be slotting in the Aspect of Quicksand. And the reason why we're going to be using the Aspect of Quicksand is because we're going to be pairing that with the Umbral aspect, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Then on our two-hand mace, obviously it's going to be the Shockwave aspect. And then we're going to follow that up with the aspect of Retaliation on our amulet. And then, like I said earlier, we're pairing the aspect of the Umbral with Quicksand. And that is because when we're using Quicksand and we hit enemies with an Earth skill, they get slowed. And then if we have the Umbral aspect on, we then generate resources off of hitting those crowd control enemies. Now, another good option here would also be the Starlight aspect, which gets a lot of benefit from the Skinwalker's aspect we have slotted in on our pants. And then moving on to our last ring, we're going to be slotting in the Blood Boiling aspect, which is incredibly valuable for leveling all the way up until I would say about Tier 2, or Torment 2, I should say. And then once you hit that difficulty, it feels like it drops off dramatically. So as I have written down here in the text box below, when you do get to Torment 2, go ahead and start transitioning either into the mid-tier version of this build if you haven't already, or start transitioning into a different build, whichever one you're choosing to play with the Druid this season. Moving on to the affixes, and we're not going to go super in-depth with these because, again, this is a leveling build. All I want you guys to do is to make sure you're hitting your armor and your resistance caps for every single difficulty tier you scale into. So on the helmet, we're running armor, resist to all elements, spirit per second, with a defensive tempering of total armor. Whatever your second tempering is up to you. On the chest piece, we're running armor, resist to all elements, and spirit per second. Now, you can change the spirit per second to HP if you want to, but as you guys can see, there's a pattern here, just getting tons of armor and resistances to make sure you're hitting those caps. That's really all I want you to do. And then again, a defensive tempering of total armor. For our gloves, if you can find yourself a ranks to pulverize, that's awesome, but it's not necessary. And then getting some max life here is perfectly fine too. And then for our offensive tempering, getting some extra overpower damage, because we will be using overpower to do most of our damage with this setup, and we are going to be overpowering quite often. Then on our pants, we're using armor, resistance to all elements, max life, and again, some more total armor. Moving on to our boots, we're going armor, spirit per second, movement speed, and then getting more movement speed here for mobility. Now, this movement speed tempering can also be ranks to digigrade gait if you would like it to be, but it doesn't have to be. Moving on to our weapon, again, we're using a mace for the extra overpower damage. Then we're going to be picking up willpower, max life, and overpower damage, followed up with a weapon tempering for chance to pulverize twice, which really isn't that important because it's such a small chance to occur. And then we're also picking up some more overpower damage for our offensive tempering. Onto our amulet, we're running max life, movement speed, critical strike chance, and then some more movement speed or ranks to digigrade gait, and then overpower damage here as well. And then for both of our rings, we're going to be running critical strike chance, attack speed, max life, overpower damage, and then cataclysm cooldown reduction. Now, if you prefer, instead of cataclysm cooldown reduction, you can use some kind of resource cost reduction or resource generation increase if you would like to. Now moving on to our rune words, we're going to be using Sir and Gar for that extra critical strike chance. And then for our second rune word, we're going to be using Sim and Qua, so that way we can get that extra movement speed in the early game, which is going to help us out a lot because Druid is typically incredibly slow early on, and this basically just gets rid of that problem. Now moving on to our Season 7 mechanic, the Witchcraft powers. So for our unique power, which you may not have access to, I like to use the Piranha Tornado, or Pronado, I think is how you pronounce it. But you can use Vengeful Spirit if you do not have this one. Then I like to pick up Aura of Siphoning first, as I really like the extra poison damage. It helps give us easy access to the Envenom passive, and it also gives us a nice 1% max life heal as well. Then from there, I like to pick up Soul Harvest, Hex of Whispers, and then Force of Will for that added overpower damage. Now, Aura Specialization is a little bit harder to get because you're going to have to farm some Nightmare dungeons and some Root Hole dungeons in order to find those altars to obtain these specific witch powers. So if you do not have the Aura Specialization, go ahead and use whatever witch power you prefer. I personally like the Hex of Shattering to get that extra damage reduction because, like I said, I play this build in hardcore, so any amount of damage reduction feels really good and keeps us from meeting an untimely demise. And then moving on to our gems, and this is what I slot in if I don't have an occult gem or if I don't have any rune words. So I go rubies on the weapon for more overpower damage, sapphires on the armor for more willpower, and then diamonds across the board on my jewelry pieces to give me that extra all resist to my character so I can easily meet those resistance caps. Now moving on to the skill tree, and as you guys can see here, we have the leveling pathway all set up. Now, if you do need to deviate from this pathway for whatever reason, feel free to do so. This is just how I like to set it up for when I'm leveling with my pulverized druid. So on our basic skill tree, we're just going claw into enhanced claw. Then on our core skill tree, we're going 5 points pulverize into raging pulverize for the extra overpower damage. Then we're going to be picking up 3 points in iron fur for the damage reduction. Then we're grabbing 1 point Heart of the Wild so that way we can pick up 3 points Wild Impulses. Down to our defensive skill tree, we're going 1 point Earthenborg into enhanced Earthenborg for the unstoppable. Then we're going 1 point Cyclone Armor, but I usually put this off to the end of my leveling. And then we're going 3 points Backlash, 3 points Ancestral Fortitude, which I typically prioritize pretty early on, and then 3 points into Vigilance. Next, for our companion skill tree, we're going 1 point Poison Creeper into Brutal Poison Creeper for the added critical strike chance buff. And then we're picking up 3 points into Feral Aptitude. Down to our Wrath skill tree, we're going 3 points Mending Stone and then 3 points Provocation. And I prioritize 3 points Provocation early on because, again, we're going to be using Cataclysm, and we really like that overpower Cataclysm for those hard to kill bosses. Then we're going 3 points Crushing Earth, 3 points into Stone Guard, and 1 point into Safeguard. And then we're picking up a 1 point Neurotoxin into 3 points in Venom. Moving on to our ultimate skill tree, we're going 3 points Defiance into 3 points Circle of Life, which is a nice early on heal when you do use your core skills. Then we're going to be picking up 5 points of Cataclysm into Supreme Cataclysm to have access to Vulnerability. Then, as always, we're going to be picking up 3 points of Quick Shift as well as 3 points of Height and Senses. And then, last but not least, for our key passive, we're going to be using Ursine Strength. Now, as you guys can see here, I did go ahead and add a few Paragon points to the starter board, as well as a first glyph to slot in, just so that way you guys have that available. But don't forget, I also have the mid-tier as well as the in-game tier build set up here. So all I have to do is click over to one of these planners, and it will give you the full breakdown of the Paragon board if you're choosing to stick with Pulverize until you get to the end game with the build. And then last but certainly not least, our Mercenary. And guys, if you're playing through hardcore, do not forget to pick up your Mercenary as soon as you can, because it is a valuable companion. It can potentially save your character from death. So for my Mercenary, again, because I play in hardcore, I like to go with right here because he has this nice passive that will actually save you when you fall below 15% health, and has a pretty nice cooldown of 30 seconds. Then I go into Shield Charge as well as Rahir's Guard for the added armor. However, if you are missing resistances instead of armor, just path down through Ground Slam into Rahir's Aegis because it has a nice 15% resistance to all elements buff there. Then from Rahir's Guard, I go into Provoke to get that taunt so it will pull enemies off of me. And then Mocking Lure so that way when enemies are taunted by Rahir, I get a nice little bonus damage. Now again, if you've chosen to go the path of Rahir's Aegis, I like to go Bastion to give you that nice dome around your character that makes you pretty much invulnerable to all damage. And then I'll pick up Inspiration to give you that nice damage increase while you're inside of Rahir's Bastion. And then for my reinforcement, I like to use Aldekin with Field of Languish. You can choose to use whatever reinforcement mercenary you like. Another good option here would be Variana with Bloodthirst to increase your attack speed. But that's my Pulverize leveling build here for Season 7. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I will be making an in-game video for Pulverize as well. However, I am quite occupied building out my Boulder Cane setup, and then I'm going to be swapping over to Cataclysm, and then I'll follow that up with Shred, and then I'll probably stop back by Pulverize before moving on to other builds. But anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think about the build down in the comment section below, and if you have any questions regarding the build or anything with Season 7 whatsoever, go ahead and post them down in the comments as well, and I will answer those as soon as I see them. But as always, guys, I hope you're having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from, and peace out. I will see you in the next one.